Hello, I'm Bob Harris. Welcome to Duraamen's educational series for industrial and decorative concrete flooring systems. Radiant floor heating is gaining in popularity due to the savings in energy costs. It is more efficient than traditional heating methods. There are two popular radiant heat systems: electric radiant heat systems and hydronic systems. Electric radiant floors typically consist of electric cables built into the floor. Systems that feature mats of electrically conductive plastic mounted on the subfloor below a floor covering such as tile are also available. Hydronic liquid systems are the most popular and cost-effective radiant heating systems for heating cold climates. Hydronic radiant floor systems pump heated water from a boiler through tubing laid in a pattern under the floor. Duraamen gets several requests to show how to install concrete flooring over radiant heat flooring systems. This video shows the installation process over a hydronic system. However, the viewers can adapt the same method to install the concrete floors over electric radiant heat floors. Let's review the steps to install the Duraamen flooring system over hydronic radiant heat flooring. Generally, you need to start with the consideration of substrate prep. If the substrate prep is over slab on grade, you're going to want to reference ICRI, which is the International Concrete Repair Institute guideline. They have a method selection chart that tells you the proper CSP, which stands for concrete surface profile. What we're looking for is a surface profile of somewhere around 4, which usually can be obtained with dry grinding, dustless grinding, with a very aggressive metal grit, say 16 grit, or perhaps a 25 or even a 30 grit. Or shot blasting is usually the method for profiling the substrate. Now, there are manufacturers that produce the radiant heat flooring systems that recommend an insulation board. And the insulation board is a cementitious product that gets laid down and embedded into a thin set material, very similar to like you would install tile. And then once that's been embedded into the thin set, you address the seams of the boards, just traditional fiberglass tape and thin set material or real thin cement basically for the seams. And the logic is the insulation board, it doesn't allow the heat to transfer down into the concrete substrate, so it goes back up, and it's just more efficient for heating your flooring system. So regardless if you're going over slab on grade or the insulation cementitious board, the next step is to prime. We're going to use the Paramol, basically, which is a 1-to-1 system, meaning 1 gallon of the primer to 1 gallon of water. So you're going to always use that 1-to-1 ratio, and you're going to go ahead and install the primer, and then once that's dry, you come in, and the next step is to install the hydronic tubing. Now, most contractors outsource that. They'll have a professional contractor come in and actually install the radiant heat tubing. Once the tubing has been anchored down sufficiently where it's not going to float, it has to be thoroughly anchored down. The next step is to install the second coat of the Paramol primer, once again diluted at a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 part water to 1 part Paramol, sprayed right over, and right over the tubes and everything. Generally, we want a minimum of 2 hours for the primer to go ahead and tack off and dry. And once that is dry, where you don't see any wet spots, tack-free, the next step is to lay down a fiber mat. So here's an example. It comes in this roll. I've cut off a little piece just to show you here for demonstration purposes. And what is done with this mat is it's rolled out and covers the entire surface. You're generally looking for roughly a 6-inch overlap. So the next mat, when you roll it out, you want a minimum of a 6-inch overlap. It's all covered, and now it's time to think about the next step, which is installing the Param 4500 self-leveling cement. A word of caution, the radiant heat tubing is very delicate, so you can't just haphazardly go out, and certainly you're not going to wear anything that's going to puncture down into the tubing. So you've got to be kind of methodical in your installation process, and generally what you're going to do is you're going to keep a wet edge starting from the furthest point, and you're going to keep that wet edge, and you're literally just kind of pushing the material around and letting it seek its own level. Once you have the material that's been encapsulated, the next step is to use a roller like this, and you're going to agitate the mat. Literally, in this kind of a fashion. You're going to roll in different directions, and the logic is to break the mat apart. So all of these thousands and thousands of fibers get thoroughly mixed into the Param 4500. You're looking for a thickness of about ½ inch over the top of the tube. So what I mean is, if this is your radiant heat hydronic tubing, you're looking for a minimum thickness of ½ inch over that, so it's, you know that it's in fact completely encapsulated into the cement. Now we mix up our Param 4500 self-leveling cement, and once you've installed over the entire surface, generally you're going to wait 24 hours, next day, and you're going to come back and you're going to sand the surface. What you're trying to do is, if there are any fibers, you're going to break those fibers off. You're going to sand it and make sure it's thoroughly cleaned. Okay. Once the surface has been thoroughly cleaned, we're going to install 100% solids epoxy as a primer, and then we're going to broadcast dried sand into that to refusal. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to see any wet spots. Oftentimes when I see people that are putting a primer down, you'll see dry, wet, dry, wet. You don't want to do that. You want to make certain that that is in fact completely, the sand's been installed to 100% rejection, so you don't see any wet areas. Following day, come back, vacuum, sweep, and scrape any of the sand residual, get all of the particulate off, and once that has been prepped, the next step is to install the Param 5500 self-leveling cement. Now this will become your final flooring system, your wear surface, if you will, and you have plenty of architectural solutions here when using this product. You can integrally color this material with using Color Fast. You can, after the fact, you can put a dye down for coloring. So there's many different options available, architecturally speaking or decoratively speaking. Also, if you're going to consider polishing this, this is where you would use the Param 6000, and this surface could easily be polished, traditional, with grinding, honing, and polishing to create a beautiful polished surface. So as you can see, there are plenty of opportunities using the complete Duraamen system, and we're going to demonstrate how the material goes down over our hydronic heating tubes. We're ready for our first application of the Paramol primer. To recap up until this point, remember, if it's slab on grade, basically you want to properly profile, usually a concrete surface profile of 4 to 5, dustless grinding or shot blasting, or if the contractor had installed the insulated cementitious board embedded into a thin set. So those were your two options in terms of preparing your substrate. Now we're going to mix our Paramol, and it's 1 part water to 1 part primer. You can probably see over here we have the level of the water specifically right at 1 gallon. So now we're going to go ahead and mix our 1 gallon of the Paramol primer into the water that you see. Now, if you're mixing small ratios like this, and certainly for the purpose of this educational video, we're simply going to just take a stir stick and stir it up. Generally, though, you're going to be mixing larger volumes or larger quantities. 5 gallons, for example, you're going to mix into a 5-gallon bucket. It'd be a good idea to go ahead and use a drill and make sure that this material is fully agitated and thoroughly mixed, so it's ready to go. So now we have a total of 2 gallons, you can see over here on the side. So 1 to 1 is our ratio. Now there are several ways, at least on the first coat, that you can put it down. You can simply dump the material onto the prepared substrate and take a push broom and broom it around, or in our case what we're going to do is we're going to use a 3/8 of an inch nap roller and roll it on. I have seen installers also put this in a pump-up sprayer and spray it down, followed by back rolling. So there's several ways or methods that you can actually install the primer. You're looking for just a thorough coat, and generally each application is going to yield roughly 250 to 300 square feet per coat per mixed gallon. So that gives you kind of a coverage rate of the material. This will thoroughly dry. Just to recap, once we install our first application and it was thoroughly dry, minimum of 2 to 3 hours. The next step would be to install your hydronic heating tubing. Okay, so we're thoroughly mixed now. So we're going to go ahead and install the material. This is basic stuff just to bring it up. Normally you're going to put slip-on booties. You want to keep your substrate super clean. You don't want any particulate. You don't want to just be, tracking dust or debris up onto your surface. So just be cautious in terms of keeping your substrate nice and clean. The Paramol is an important step with the Duraamen system, with the Param 4500 and followed by the Param 5500 or the 6000. A couple of reasons. Certainly adhesion is one primary function, but also this is going to help eliminate any outgassing. So you're in essence sealing the pores or the porosity of the concrete when using this system. So it is a good idea if you have any slab penetrations, perhaps a stub up electrical or a toilet in a bathroom, it is a good idea to cut in with a chip brush around any of the slab penetrations to make sure you're getting uniform coverage of the material. Radiant heat tubing can also be installed over wood subfloors. So if you're going over a wood subbase, basically you're going to use the same primer. However, the Paramol is not going to be thinned, meaning you're going to use it neat right out of the jug. And if you're going over wood using this primer, the Paramol, basically you're applying it only one application, so it doesn't require 2 applications like we're going to be doing here. Okay, the radiant heat hydronic tubing has been installed. Now it's time to apply our second application of Paramol primer. So what we're going to do is simply put it in a pump-up sprayer and spray it right over everything, the substrate, the wire, and the radiant heat tubing as well. Our second coat of primer has had sufficient dry time, about 2.5 hours with these conditions, that we spray applied over the top of the radiant heat flooring. And now what we've done is we've installed our fiber mat that you see here. Remember, it comes in a roll like you see, roughly 800 square feet per roll. And what we did is we laid it out flat, cut it with scissors. We did honor our 6-inch overlap, as you see right here. So this is really a unique product specifically over radiant heat tubing. However, it can also be used over, say, a distressed concrete substrate. Perhaps it has chips, gouges, divots, spalls, cracks. We've had some good success using this roll of fiber mat basically over distressed floors. Also, there are many applicators that have had very good successes using this over wood substrates. So same thing, you would apply it, go ahead and prep your wood properly. You would roll this out just like you see right here, and then pour your self-leveling material. And the next step is, once you have a uniform layer of the material, you use this plastic roller and you actually roll the fiber, and what you're trying to do is break apart or agitate, if you will, the fibers so it kind of mixes in with your self-leveling cement. So once we get a uniform layer, probably 3 to 4 bags. Now we'll probably, if I'm guessing, we're going to use the equivalent of about 8 bags of material right here. So what we would do is put 4 bags down, roughly halfway, roll all the fibers, and then finish going to whatever the desired depth of installation. Remember, we're shooting for a 1/2 inch over the top of the radiant tubing.